So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce everybody to Alex, who is a pastry chef and owner of Kitchen Island. And today she's going to teach us how to make a seasonal and sustainable carrot soup. So Alex, whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
Hi, hello. Thanks everyone for finding the time to join us today. So as Megan said, we're going to be making a carrot soup and we're going to be making croutons for our carrot soup. And we're going to be using a day-old bread. I have here a focaccia that I made a few days ago. It's not so soft and nice anymore, but it will be just perfect to soak our soup. So you all have the recipes, and I want us to make sure we're ready and we have all the ingredients here. So we have the carrots, onion, celery, stock, veggie stock, if you have from Joyce demo. If not, water is perfect. Spices, sage, milk, if you decide to use milk. And I'm using maple. You can use a little honey. It just at the end adds a little bit of a nice sweeter twist to it. So we will start by chopping and peeling our vegetables. Feel free to start peeling and chopping your carrots. So we're looking for, because we're gonna puree the soup later, so it doesn't have to be like nice pieces of carrots, just even size, because we want them to cook evenly. Yeah, that's a nice thing about pureed soup, is that you can just chop the vegetables and don't have to care about how they look. So I'm saving my peels for the future veggie stock. And I also save the ends. Everything goes. So the veggies that I'm kind of trying to use for veggie stock, it's root vegetables, which onions, carrots, parsnip, celery. I don't use starchy vegetables like potatoes because it adds color and maybe some flavor that we don't want to. I use celery, onions, carrots, and herbs. So I'm chopping my carrots roughly into this size. I'll get it closer into the camera. So because we are doing a demo and I wanted to have a little shortcut because I want you to see the end result, and it take about half an hour for the soup to cook. I roasted my carrots and I have them here nice and roasted. So that will make the cooking process faster because they are cooked, but it also adds another layer of flavor. You can do it next time or today if you feel like. So it actually caramelizes the natural sugars that carrot have anyway. So I did that, and it's gonna be waiting for the rest of the ingredients. In the meantime, I want you to turn the ovens on because we'll be doing the croutons soon, and we need to warm the oven. We need a hot oven. So let's turn the ovens on so it will start heating.
And Alex, what temperature are you roasting the carrots at?
So for the croutons, you want to be 180 or 350 Fahrenheit, pretty regular temperature, because we just want to dry them a little bit and not to burn them. So carrots, and we have the onions that I'm gonna be cutting.
And when you roasted the carrots, what temperature did those go in at?
Oh, that's a good question. I roast them on high heat because I want, again, to get this caramelization effect. So I roast it on 200 Celsius, which is 400 Fahrenheit. So yeah, that gets a nice like brown edges. And I roast them for like, I would say 10-15 minutes, but I keep an eye on them because I want this brown edges, but I don't want them to go too brown or cook fully cooked, because we're going to be cooking them in our soup. Yeah, so the same with the onions. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to chop it finely. I just like cut in half and then like quarters. Oh, good job. I'm saving even the peel of the onion, the skin for the stalk, because that's what gives it the nice brown color. Actually, that's a secret I learned from my coworker. Her Italian nonna used to do that stock, and she said save the onion skins because that gives the color. So we have our onion ready. I'm gonna turn on the heat in my pot. A little bit of oil, medium heat, and I will put my onions in there. Give it a nice stir so it's coated with oil and start work. And next we're moving to our celeries. So 2 stalks of celeries. When I cut the bottom, I save it for the future stock. And even size with celery, I like to chop them a little bit smaller than the onions, mainly because it will be easier to puree it all after. And so we allowing our onion and celery, if your carrots are ready, dump them in, put them in the pot again. We allow them to cook a little bit to release the natural juices, to start sweating a little bit. That's good for the flavor. It enhances the flavor. So we're gonna cook a little bit more. Yeah, do we have any questions in the meantime while we're waiting for the chopping part to be done?
So I'll wait and see if anyone types anything into the chat, but while we're waiting, I'd just love to ask what makes this recipe climate friendly.
Okay, so there are quite a few aspects to this recipe. So first of all, I'm using vegetables that are widely available here in South Ontario in this time of year. I believe that if we can avoid shipping produce from far away, that reduce our footprints, ecological footprints. So it is available here. It is grown here. It supports our community financially and agriculturally. And that's about the soup. And for the bread, we all have old bread that sometimes, let's face it, we just throw it. And if we can give it a second life, that's my zinc moments. I love to repurpose or find other stuff. So we can do, right now we're making croutons, but you can make breadcrumbs out of old bread. I do have a bag of old bread that I'm saving, and depends on what on the menu for my family. So we either making breadcrumbs and then maybe, I don't know, schnitzels or something, or croutons. So there are 2 aspects of eco-friendliness to this recipe. And I'm just gonna mix my vegetables and see how they're doing. So I will move on with the preparation. So my onions start getting a little bit brown in a good way, caramelizing and getting ready. So we're gonna pretty much add the rest of the ingredients in the menu. I'm gonna be starting with our spices. So we have cinnamon and we have turmeric, and we're gonna add just a little bit of that, just like 1/4 of a spoon of each. We don't want our soup to be cinnamony. We don't want it to be very strong flavor, but I want to layer the flavors. So each time when I'm coming to make a pastry, or I love to cook, so I'm cooking a lot as well. So if I'm cooking or baking, I'm thinking about how can I make this more complex in a good way. So when you eat that, it's not just oh, it's a carrot cake. It's that's a really good carrot cake. So I find that cinnamon and turmeric adds a little bit of this, it takes it a little bit to maybe Mediterranean flavors, but it adds a really nice flavor. So I'm gonna add it now. And when it's gonna be cooking with the vegetables, it's kind of like roasting almost the spices. So I'm gonna add 1/4 spoon of each. The fragrance are immediately opening, and that's great. So I have dry sage that I grew last summer in my garden. At the fall, I harvest all my herbs that I didn't use, and I'm drying them and using them throughout the winter. So I have dry sage. If you have fresh, that's great. We can add like 2-3 leaves, because again, we don't want it to be very dominant. We just want it to add a complexity to our final product. So that goes in. I will be adding my roasted carrots into the pot, some salt and pepper. I'm kind of eyeballing my salt and pepper, but I highly encourage you testing all the way. Like obviously now I want to test it because it's still hot vegetables and it's not a soup, but as you go, start with maybe 1 teaspoon, but later when we have the liquid in, you can taste and try how that feels. Okay, so awesome. I have everything in. I have carrot, celery, onion, spices, sage, and I'm gonna be adding now my stock. If you have water, that's perfect. So when making pureed soup, and in general, soups are pretty easy, but I think the most challenging point for me was the ratio of vegetables to liquid, because sometimes it can be, looks great, but doesn't taste so flavorful. So I kind of like find, like, you see, I didn't add all my stock because I can always go and add later. It's easier than adding a lot and then having to fix it with adding vegetables or flavors. So I feel to the point where they're kind of like swimming inside, floating inside. They have room, but not too much. Because again, I can always add more liquid, but taking it off or getting rid of it, it's harder. So now that's heating up. We're waiting for it to boil. Once it will reach a boiling point, I will reduce the heat, cover it, and it's going to be cooking for half an hour. Our maple and milk will be waiting until the very end. We don't want to cook the milk all the 30 minutes. We're going to be, if we're adding it, we're going to be adding in later to add like a nice fresh milky touch to it. Do we have any questions, or can I move on to the focaccia?
So I've got 2 questions in the chat for you.
Yes.
The first is, can you freeze celery when it's in season to use later?
That's a good question. I never tried that, but I believe yes. I would say, because that's what I'm doing with rhubarb, coming very soon. I placed my order, but that's what I'm doing, and I think it's pretty much same family. So I'm washing it and I'm chopping it, and then I'm freezing it. So I believe celery would be a good candidate for freezing.
Perfect. And then Karen would like to know, have you seen the new cookbook from IKEA? It's called the Scraps Book, and it's free, and it has recipes for using foods you'd normally throw away.
I haven't seen that. Thanks so much for bringing it up. I'm a big fan of IKEA. I know people either have love or hate relationship with IKEA. I love IKEA. I'm definitely gonna grab a copy next time I'm there.
Perfect. And I can write that down, and we'll include that in the resources we send around after all of our sessions. And Karen has also noted that she tried freezing asparagus last year and it got tough.
Asparagus is not a good freezing veggie. I tried to do that and they end up like being, if you kind of like gonna use them later, maybe like in a cheese mix, like a filling for some savory pastry, that's okay, because taste wise it stays the same, but texture it doesn't thaw really well.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. I think that's all of our questions for now.
Awesome. Then I'll move on maybe for the focaccia, for the croutons demo. So as I mentioned, I have an old focaccia that is too tired to be sandwiched and fresh and served like in a fresh way. So it is the perfect time for her to turn into croutons. So what I'm slicing, first of all, I'm slicing it into, like, I would say less than an inch thickness. It could be any bread. It doesn't have to be focaccia. It could be Wonder Bread. It can be any bread, buns, you name it. it just, we need to cut them into like squares of about an inch, maybe less than an inch. Toss them with some olive oil and sea salt or pepper, or like you can add, you want to go fancy, you can add Parmesan or garlic, you name it. I love that you can be creative and use whatever you have on hand. My kids are not big veggie eaters, but when we have soup with croutons, that's kind of like what makes them eat, because they love the croutons, and that's the vehicle for me to get some nutrients and veggie for them. So tonight they're gonna be happy. Okay. And so to avoid wasting a lot of olive oil or be more efficient with that, I'm gonna put my bread in a bowl and drizzle a little bit on top, salt and pepper. So my focaccia already made with herbs. Otherwise, I would chop and add some maybe rosemary or thyme, but I have it in my focaccia, so I'm only seasoning with salt and pepper, but feel free to add any herbs if you like. And then I'm gonna just mix it, and it will more evenly coat with olive oil. Just gonna add a little bit more because I love the crunch. You can also toss it around, and that way we don't end up having a lot of olive oil on our baking sheet. It's all soaking into our bread here. Going on to here, and I have my baking sheet pan and parchment paper. It's important when we're making our croutons, and also when we roast up our vegetables, we want to spread them in one layer and make sure that they have some space around, because otherwise it will cook the bread or the veggies and it will make it soggy. But what we want to do is to crisp them. So if we don't like gather them, we like spread them around in one nice layer, the hot air will do the magic and create the crisp rather than like just soften it and cooking it. So I have my croutons here, nice and even, and it's going into the oven. I'm gonna set timers because it's important. I'm gonna start with 6 minutes for the croutons. In the meantime, I see that my water has boiled. Nice. I'm gonna reduce the heat here. Give it a nice stir. It smells great. Smells cinnamony and nice. Okay. So now we're waiting. Do we have any questions or?
Yeah, so I've got just a couple. So you've already talked about the importance of having ingredients you've sourced seasonally and locally.
Yeah.
As well as using up food scraps you might not usually, so like making your croutons out of bread that's gone stale. Are there other sustainable practices that you have in your kitchen?
I do, and obviously now I can't think of it. I'm trying to repurpose whatever I can. For example, like, so professionally, I'm a pastry chef and I'm making more pastry, though I cook a lot because I do a lot of savory pastry, so for the fillings. But I'm trying to, even if I have dough scraps, to come up with something, even if it's like, I don't know, if we have like cookie dough left over, so we just bake it and then make it into a crumble for a cheesecake base. And we try to avoid like extra packaging and use paper package when we can.
Yeah, no, that's all wonderful. I know how hard it is to cut extra packaging out of your kitchen. It seems like everything's an extra packaging now.
Yeah, yeah, and like honestly, my main pain is saran wrap. I hate using it, but on the other hand, there is nothing else right now. I'm constantly checking and researching for alternative for that. So sometimes we're reusing like garbage bags if we need like to wrap a tray, a bit like a big tray. So we're using like garbage bags and we reuse it few times rather than like wrapping it with plastic wrap. But that's like my main thing that I'm determined to find an alternative for.
Yeah, I've used beeswax wraps personally, but I also know it's hard because you don't want to get much food on them because cleaning can also be really difficult because if you use
Yeah,
warm or
I
hot
use
water,
them a
you
lot
melt your
at
wax.
home. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I use them a lot at home. At work, because we're working with like big quantities,
Of
like it's
course.
a really big sheet. So that's can be hard sometimes.
We've had a couple people like commiserating in the chat about how hard it is to freeze asparagus. Is there something else you can do to save the ends of asparagus? Like, would you put this in your veggie stock, for example?
No, because asparagus has a significant different flavor, so I won't use that, as well as I won't use dill in my stock. I will use parsley ends or like even cilantro may be okay, but like dill, no, broccoli, no, asparagus, no, because they have like a very significant thing. And if you're doing an asparagus soup with it, you can make a stock, absolutely. But if you're gonna be using like, I don't know, for your beef stew or like
Mm-hmm.
chili stew, asparagus won't be the best thing. So it depends. You can save that, and if you'll be using something asparagus for this with the asparagus, if that makes sense. So that.
Perfect. Yeah, we've got a couple comments. So Karen has said she discovered that the inner plastic milk bags are great to reuse as baggies or as piping bags, which is not something I'd thought of, but that makes complete sense. I should
That's
definitely try
right.
that.
Yes,
And then,
that's a great thing. I
right?
mean, I have reusable piping bag, but sometimes
Mhm.
I wish that I could have disposable and not feel bad about it.
And then Alex has also said you can rejuvenate your wax wraps by putting it between parchment paper and running a hot iron over it. Yeah.
Nice. Oh, I love the sharing of information and hacks.
Do we have a few more minutes for another question, or is it about time for your
Yeah, I'm just
croutons?
gonna check my pot. And so at this point, I'm gonna taste my liquid to see if it needs more salt or anything. Oh yeah, I would add a little bit salt to that. Yes, I'm ready for more questions.
So I'd invite anyone, if you have any questions, to go ahead and pop them in the chat box. And then, Alex, I just had one more from Green Venture.
Yes.
So I know on your website, you talk about having home cooked meals being a really important part of your life, despite your parents having really busy day jobs. So would you have any advice for people who want to start using like seasonal ingredients and making home cooked meals into their busy schedules?
Yeah. So I have one great resource that I'm always turning to when I'm planning my menu, whether it's for my family cooking or for my work. The Ontario Availability Guide. I think it's under the Foodland website. So they have a list of fruits and veggies and broken by month when it's available here in Ontario. And it's a great tool for me to plan future cooking or future menus, stuff like that. So that's a very useful resource. Other than that, after you start cooking and like researching and learning a little bit about that, you will know more or less what is available and what is ready for you. So that's it. Did I miss something in the question?
No, I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have something to refer to. And as you get more familiar with it, it'll be easier to incorporate that into your kitchen.
Yeah, I'm just checking my croutons. They're doing well. Also, like to avoid food waste in the kitchen, in like my home family kitchen, I plan what we're gonna be cooking for the week. It takes some time to adjust the way you think about grocery shopping and cooking, but I kind of like try to plan what are we gonna be cooking next week. So when I'm going to a grocery store, I'm buying what I need to buy and not what is on sale, which sometimes things on sale, don't get me wrong, I'll get them and I'll do something with them. But just like to avoid food waste, because when I do have to like throw a bunch of parsley or like carrots that are sad or something, when I have to get rid of food, it really, on a personal level, it makes me really sad. So I'm planning what we're gonna do, and when I'm going to a grocery store, I have a list, and that way I know, like, even, I don't know, like yesterday we made something with pasta, and I still have like leftover about like a dish, a full plate of pasta. So tonight I'm gonna make so it's kind of like an Israeli dish, but it's almost like a frittata. So I'm gonna be adding like leftover pasta from yesterday with some eggs, some like potatoes, some veggies, throwing it into the oven. So that way I'm kind of repurposing the pasta. Let's be honest, it's not the yummiest thing the day after, but it will get like a new turn or like new life. So that's something I trained myself to think.
That sounds delicious too.
Thanks. I find like leftover meal are my favorite because it's almost like surprising you each time. Like, oh, that actually really works well. I'm just gonna check quickly here. So our croutons are getting there. Just gonna give them 5 more minutes. Oh, right.
So I don't have anything in the chat so far, but I'm sure anything that you can share with us about cooking sustainably would be wonderful. Yes, I'm looking that way because that's my bookshelf. I have a great book that I want to recommend for sustainable cooking. It's called Everlasting Meal by Tamar Adler. And it's an awesome way to start thinking sustainably in the kitchen, because it starts from like how you can cook pasta and save some of the water to make better sauce. And when you cook like this thing, what I said about my pasta that I made yesterday, then I'm gonna repurpose today into this like frittata dish. So that's kind of thinking Tamar introducing in this book, of like how to don't lose your resources, your ingredients, and how to make the best out of everything. And she also has great cooking tips on like what's the best way to make a hard-boiled egg, or for even like for water, like she say when you do hard-boiled eggs and you like gonna be making potatoes with it, so you can cook them together and save energy from like electricity or whatever, and save the water and all that. So it's not like necessarily eco-friendly approach, but it is, but it's more like those little hacks in the kitchen of like how to make things easier and better for the environment, for the people. And so that was like one of my first turning points in incorporate eco-friendly approach to the kitchen. So I highly recommend that. Perfect, thank you. I'll make sure that we have that title in the resources we send everybody.
And I know it's available in the library because my friend recently got that book, so no excuses. And so I'm gonna try, I have a knife here. I'm gonna try and poke one of my carrots to see where we're at. I always say that the times on the recipes are great. It's a great guideline, but you always have to be on top of the game and check, because different ovens act differently, different veggies act differently. My carrots took them only 12 minutes to roast, while Helena's carrots taking over 15 minutes. So it is good to follow the suggested time, but always be your own supervisor, or like be on top of it and check your stuff. So I'm gonna check my carrots. Okay. So also when I'm checking my vegetable for doneness, I will pick the chunkier one because they take longer time. And with my soup, they already ready because I roasted them, so it's faster. So at this point, I'm gonna turn off the heat and I'm gonna get my immersion blender and do that. It will be a little bit loud, so I'll get back with explanation once I'm done doing this. When you do it, be very careful because you don't want to splash a hot soap on yourself. So my croutons are ready, and I'm looking for them to be like nice and tan. I do like not to get them to like very brown end because I want the center to be slightly softer. So we have like two texture, crunchy on the outside and like more chewy on the inside. So my soup does need more liquid. And here I have more stock. I'm gonna be doing that, adding that. A little bit at a time. At this point, I'm gonna add my milk. I'm using milk, but it's definitely not necessary if you want to try to keep it dairy-free or vegan. I like it because it adds like a nice round, it's not even flavor, but just like makes it a little bit nicer. So I'm gonna add it now, as well as 1 tablespoon worth of maple or honey. Alrighty.
And Alex, can you remind us how long you baked the croutons for?
So it was, I would say 10 to 12 minutes. I first set a timer for 6 minutes. I checked them and then I gave them another 5 minutes. And after I turned off the timer, it was probably there for now like 1 or 2 minutes. So I would say between 10 and 15 minutes, start checking after 10.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so I did end up using my the amount of liquid, the veggie broth that I intended to, but I just added it later. So now that I added the rest of the ingredients, I'm giving it 5 more minutes to cook together to kind of like get to know each other and combine, and my soup will be ready. So another thing with turmeric that I really like, it really complements carrots, but it also highlight the natural yellow orangey color. So it gives it like, it anyway will be orangey and nice, but it kind of like gives it another like highlight the color. So that's here.
Alex, I don't have any fresh sage, but I have some powdered sage. How much would you say would be like good enough to do?
So start with a little bit because sage has this tendency to overpower and be very strong. So if it's a dry sage, I would say start with 1/4 teaspoon. Because again, we want it just to have a nice layer in this and not sagey flavor. So a little bit. If people have their sustainable hacks in the kitchen, I invite them to share with us because I love to learn. It's like being an eco-friendly chef, or just in general, it's a learning process all the time. So if you have anything you want to share with us and you want other people to know, that would be great.
I did have a question because you mentioned the ways that you can reuse some of the leftovers you have when you're making your pastries.
Yeah.
So my question would be, if you're making a pastry that you're not supposed to handle very much, how can you reuse that without making it really tough, like a pie crust or something?
Oh, that's a good question. So when I do that, for example, I'm making now a big batch of pie shells. So I roll one chunk of dough, and I have some leftovers from when I cut it in. So I'm taking my new batch of dough and I'm adding some of those leftovers into the new batch of dough. And that way it kind of blends in and it won't be noticeable. For home purposes, you don't do lots of batches one after the other. So just freeze that. And next time when you have pie dough, when you're making pie dough, thaw that in advance. And when you're rolling it, just like smush them together and roll that.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Also,
Denise,
another thing with pie dough, I'm like, for example, this is my sheet of dough. I cut it a circle and I have like some left. I can make small hand pies with it, just to
right.
like snack as I'm cooking or stuff like that.
Oh, that sounds like a lovely snack.
Mm-hmm.
And Denise would like to know if this soup can be frozen.
Yes, absolutely. I usually do like double and then I freeze, and that's another kind of like planning your meals. I have in my basement, I have a little freezer that is dedicated to meals. So each time we make something, a stew or anything that can be frozen, we make a double batch and we store it in the freezer. And on busy nights when you don't have time to cook, you have a meal that was home cooked and ready for you to go. Okay, so I'm turning off my heat, my oven, and I'm gonna plate a little plate for us. So if we were in a real cooking show, I would have like some nice chopped parsley or chives or something green. So imagine I'm doing that. And our croutons going in. And we have nice lunch, dinner, midday snack ready.
I know you said it's not a real cooking show, but that does look beautiful, Alex.
Thank you. That's so kind of you. I'm gonna try because I can't stand and smelling that without, yeah, the right flavor profiling with like this little hints of warm spices.
Karen says she wishes she had cooked along with you now.
Oh, I know, it's like I'm person who express love through food. That was like how in my website it says that was the currency of love in our house. Like my parents were busy but food was like the like I love you in our house. So we always had food. And like being apart from people now, it's so hard on me. And even like running my business online, it's easy and it helps to overcome the COVID thing. But communicating with people and sharing my creations, my food, my baked goods, and see the reaction, I'm missing this aspect so much. So I really hope that sometime soon we'll be able to get together and cook together and share experiences and food and all that.
Oh, I hope so too. And I'm sure everyone agrees with you. All right. Well, Alex, thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, or if you think of them later, you can just email me and I can forward them on to Alex for you. And thank you to everyone for joining us during Cooking for Climate. It's been wonderful, Alex, to hear from you and from all of our other guests that have shared so much about sustainability in their kitchens. It's been wonderful to learn from you all.
Thank you for creating the platform for us to share knowledge and inspire each other. So thanks to Green Venture.
You're very welcome. We've enjoyed it. And I know Helene and I have learned a lot during this as well. And it's, again, like you said, been so nice to talk to people and to share food, even if it's virtually.
I know. Another thing, I'm working from the Kitchen Collective, which is a shared space. And obviously at work, we're wearing masks. So being able to like cook without wearing a mask, it's so nice, and interact with people, because usually at home, obviously I'm not cooking with a mask, but when I'm with other people, so it's always mask. So it's been really nice to cook and chat and not wearing a mask.
And I'm not sure if you can see the chat, but there's a lot of thank yous. And one last question, which is how thick did your soup end up being?
So it's pretty thick. I like it that way. You can thinner it with adding another liquid, water or stock. But I like when it's more like on a thicker side. It feels better and yeah.
More like hearty.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we want this time of year.
Yes. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go to my backyard and enjoy my soup under the sun.
That sounds wonderful. It's definitely beautiful. So thank you again, Alex. We really appreciated you taking the time today to share this with us.
Yay. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your company.
Thank you.
For anyone who doesn't know already, Alex does make pastry boxes that can be delivered to your house every Sunday.
Thank you. Yeah, feel free to visit our website, kitchenisland.ca, or look us on Instagram at Kitchen Island. We do Sunday sweet and savory delivery boxes based on seasonal variety. Yay!
Perfect. So I've dropped Alex's website in our chat, and her Instagram should be tagged on all of our recent Cooking for Climate posts on Green Ventures Instagram page.
Amazing. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you again, Alex.
Thanks,
Enjoy your
Alex.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.